dans ce qu'elle a dit. Permettez-moi tout d'abord de me présenter. Je m'appelle Presse et je suis actuellement
qui contribue au développement des États membres.
La légitime défense.
La légitime défense.
Alors, la législation.
Des moyens de protéger et assister la population et de résoudre
Et ça, c'est
les catastrophes naturelles
ne
et
doit pas interférer
des Nations
avec la
Unies.
souveraineté des États.
So, good afternoon, Mr. Bogetic. Let me present myself. I am Alessia and I am studying at Cycle d'orientation de Dries. Mr. Bogetic, it's truly an honor to meet you. I have few questions for you. Questions 1. Who is the member of the United Nations Security Council and what does he do?
The UN Security Council is one of the main bodies of the United Nations system. It has 15 members. There are 5 states which are permanent members. Those are the United States, United Kingdom, China, Russia and France. Those are the permanent members, which means that they're always there. In addition to these 5 members, there are also 10 other members which rotate. We call them non-permanent members because they come every 2 years. So every 2 years there is a change and we get new non-permanent members. For example, right now, in addition to these 5 big powers, we also have Japan, there is also Egypt and a number of other countries. They represent different regions. Security Council's main role, main responsibility is to preserve international peace and security. So that's their main, most important task. They also have the right to implement sanctions on a country if the country is presenting a threat to international peace and security, and they can they're the only part of the United Nations system which can authorize the use of force. So the Security Council has the right to intervene, to authorize an intervention against countries which break some rules or attack other countries, perform acts of aggression, etc. In addition to these main responsibilities, the Security Council also selects Secretary General, the head of the organization. The Security Council proposes a name of the Secretary General to the General Assembly, and then the General Assembly normally accepts this name. So the Security Council, in brief, has a number of responsibilities, but the main one is to preserve and keep international peace and security.
Okay. Do you feel that the goal and the mission of the ONU depend on this current General Secretary?
I mean, the 3 main goals of the organization of the UN have not changed too much over the past 70 years. Those are the promoting peace and security, promoting human rights, and development, fighting poverty. Those are the 3 goals of the United Nations system. Every Secretary General, of course, and so far we've had 8 Secretary Generals, each of them has brought his own perspective, his own background, his own priorities. For example, the previous Secretary General, Kofi Annan, came from Ghana. He was a UN staff member for many, many years before becoming Secretary General. He's the only Secretary General so far who has started in the UN as a very, very young man, started from a junior position and then made his way up. And some of his priorities, for example, were to promote development in Africa, to promote Millennium Development Goals, to redefine and reform peacekeeping missions. The current Secretary General, Ban Ki-moon, comes from the Republic of Korea, from South Korea, and he has a very different background. For example, he was a foreign minister of South Korea and a diplomat for many, many decades. So he brought a different perspective from Kofi Annan. One of his priorities, for example, was promoting women's rights. He established a separate part of the UN system called UN Women, which fights for gender equality and the promotion of women. And another thing, for example, he did, it was to promote the mobility of UN staff. So people, for example, UN colleagues who work in Geneva should periodically move to another place, work in Africa or Asia or New York. So he encourages this mobility and changing of locations where we work. So to answer your question, yes, each Secretary General has his own priorities, but there are also some main topics that the United Nations follows for many years. And now this year we are selecting a new Secretary General, and so we will have a new boss of the organization by the end of December. We will know the name of the new person, and he or she will take the job on the 1st of January next year. So probably there will be some new priorities and new idea.
Okay, and I know that 193 countries are members of the ONU. Could you please explain to me why the other countries are not part of the organization?
So you said it rightly. The United Nations at the moment has 193 member states. The most recent member state to join was South Sudan just several years ago. The way countries become members of the United Nations is the following. The government of a country makes an application, sends a formal letter to the Secretary General. The Secretary General then forwards this letter to the Security Council, which we mentioned earlier, and then the Security Council needs to agree to accept the country as a member state. So, as I said, there are 15 member states in the Security Council, 15 members, and the Security Council needs to have at least 9 votes in favor, 9 out of 15, to accept the new member. And a very important thing, none of the big 5 countries, which I mentioned, none of the permanent 5 member states should exercise veto, should not block the decision. So there needs to be 9 votes in favor, plus these big 5 need to agree or at least abstain. So there are a number of countries or territories in the world which are not part of the UN, not as full member states. Some of them, for example, include Palestine or Kosovo or Somaliland. So these are territories or countries on which there is still no agreement in the Security Council whether they should be admitted or not, because they have some of them have issues with sovereignty, they don't have maybe good relations with their neighbors, etc. So there are a number of countries like these 3 that I mentioned where at the moment at least there is no agreement in the Security Council whether they should be admitted. So for now we are at the number of 193, but this can change in the future if a political climate changes or the countries manage to agree. But I think for now and for at least next several years, we will probably stay at this number, 193, which covers a huge majority of countries. So it's more than, I would say, 95–98% of the countries in the world are members of the UN.
Okay, so thank you, Mr. Baguette, for this interview. It has taught me a great deal about the Law International Geneva as in relation with the UN system.
Thank you.